Okay, let's begin our mission as we always do. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving God, we thank you for these moments of grace where we come to reflect on our faith in you and our mission to change the world. Enable us to hold to a true and loving faith which witnesses to your great love in your heart for our world, that it might not only transform our lives but through us touch those who are seeking and searching for your face, sometimes without knowing it. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Welcome to the last day of the mission. It's wonderful that you're here. And last night we had an enormous crowd in the church, and probably we will tonight as well. If you'd like to come back and have this all over again, 7 o'clock tonight. And apparently this parish could not do anything without eating. You eat. It's a wonder you're not all obese. This should be the most obese parish in Los Angeles. Oh my God, and tonight apparently we're having tacos. So there we go. I'll do anything to get the crowd back, you see. Come on in. We've just started. We've just said a prayer. Come on in. It's okay, no problem. I want to talk to you today, I think, about the most important thing I want to say in this mission, because what I want to talk to you about probably wouldn't be for some of you a burning issue for you personally, but boy, is it a burning issue for our young people and for our countries as a whole, both in Australia and in the United States. And it's got to do with belief and unbelief, how we hold on to belief in the face of people who tell us we're nuts. So it might be your children or your grandchildren, your neighbours and your friends who think you're crazy for being Catholic or Christian, and it can get us down a bit these days. And they've had major inroads, and all sorts of questions are asked, and all sorts of challenges are thrown out, and often we feel quite inadequate to have the right answers, to say it in the right way, and to know what to say. And as you know, I've written 3 books now which have provocative titles, and each one of my titles comes out of a specific conversation. You might remember the first book is called Where the Hell is God? And that comes from the moment we're in a hospital room where my sister had been in a car accident and became a quadriplegic, and my mother, who's a very devout daily mass going Catholic in our local parish, turned to me and said, "Where the hell is God?" So it wasn't an angry statement, it was a desolate statement. The second book you might remember is called Why Bother Praying? And that came out of a conversation I had with a young man who's he's my age, a middle-aged man who is a wonderful fellow who once had great Catholic faith. He was once in the seminary, but now would consider himself to be an atheist or maybe an agnostic at best. And I did his wedding. He married a Catholic girl, but a couple of years later she started to develop really a very, very severe mental illness, and now is really incapacitated. She's very, very mentally ill. And they have one beautiful, beautiful daughter. And I baptised that child as well. And I can remember catching up with this chap in Sydney, and we had dinner. And at the end of the night, I said, "Chris, I just want you to know of my love and my support and my prayers." And my agnostic, once seminarian friend said, "Why would you bother praying? The love and support were okay, but why would you bother praying?" So I called the book Why Bother Praying, because I think we have to make a case for that, which is wonderful. And then the third book, which is just out, it's actually getting launched in this parish this week because it only got released in last week, is called What Are We Doing on Earth for Christ's Sake? Let me tell you, the titles always come out of somewhere. Let me tell you where it comes from. Flying on a plane for a priest can be a very risky business indeed. Either, depending on your point of view, I have been extremely lucky or extremely cursed to have to spend an awful lot of time on and off planes. And because I come from Australia and I'm invited to teach in Rome and work in the United Kingdom, Ireland and the US and Canada, I've had to do some very long plane journeys. Now, what I normally do though, because it's 25 hours from Sydney to London and it's 16 hours from Sydney to Los Angeles, then I travel in mufti. I do not travel as a priest, mainly because it's not that comfortable. But normally I get away with sitting down and getting my ear pods into my ears before I'm asked the dreaded question by the person next to me, "What do you do for a living?" Now, St. Ignatius Loyola, our founder, was very keen on the art of spiritual conversation, and so am I, but not in the sky. Ignatius knew nothing about 16-hour plane trips from Los Angeles to Sydney. In my experience, once the inquirer finds out I'm a Catholic priest, after accepting that I am who I say I am, the conversation goes in one of 5 ways. The first category were educated by nuns, brothers and priests and didn't have a happy time of it. Now, unlike me and most of us, I hope, in fact, we were taught by unbelievably dedicated religious and priests, and we had a wonderful experience of it. But some of our friends and our family didn't. So I have to sit there for 16 hours hearing about how terrible the whole experience was. I have been over Fiji 4 hours into the trip, and I'm only up to year 3 in their elementary school. So, but if I don't listen to it, well, I'm part of the whole problem. So you've got to listen to it. The second group are those who think I'm deluded, that religion is nonsense. I believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny and fairies in the garden. For the record, I don't believe in any of those. But those travellers, these atheists and agnostics, can be as vehemently evangelical as anybody I've ever met. They can be really very aggressive. And one man on one flight, after giving me an earful about my psychological impairments, then asked, and went on for an hour telling me how crazy I was to believe in anything called God. And after giving me an earful about this, then rang his call attendant button and asked to be moved to another seat. Not only did I get equal time to reply to my detractor, my belief was so clinicalised that he was going to be infected by my belief even by sitting next to me. The third group are my favourites, I have to say. They're very, very conservative Catholics who within 3 sentences of the conversation know more about the state of my soul than me or my confessor. They have great gifts, I've discovered, in regard to knowledge and prophecy, but very few in regard to charity. It all stems from the fact that I'm not wearing a clerical collar. They say things like, "Are you ashamed of your priesthood?" No, I'm not, is the answer to that. Of your faith in Jesus Christ? No, I'm not. If you wore a clerical dress, you could provide a real witness for this plane, but you're one of those priests who want it all on your own terms. Well, really, I point out to them, we're on a 24-hour flight from Sydney to London, and I wonder whether we'd be having this discussion about my clothes if I was a judge, a surgeon, a soldier, or a policeman, or a pilot. And they normally come back and say, yes, but a priest is a vocation, not a job. Well, I don't know if they've met the surgeons, policewomen, pilots, and soldiers that I've had the privilege to meet. The word vocation comes from the Latin word vocare, meaning to be called. I know judges, surgeons, pilots and policemen and women who are profoundly called, and they live that vocation as richly as mine. So saying that that is simply a job is just wrong. But then I tell my interlocutor that I'm a Jesuit, and with that wonderful roll of the eyes, it's clear that my type of demon can only be cast out by prayer and fasting. The fourth group are my evangelical brothers and sisters. Now, don't get me wrong, I said yesterday that our evangelical Christians are some of the finest Christians I know. They really live the faith in a very wonderful way, but they can be a bit earnest. And their version of the eye of the needle to which we all have to pass through can be very tight indeed. So on finding out I'm a Catholic priest, they seriously asked me, have you given your life to Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Saviour? Yes, I have. And on it goes from there. The fifth group are in fact the most serious. They're Catholics, Christians and other religious and agnostics, atheists, humanists and everything in between, who are as scandalised as I've been with the clergy sexual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church and its cover-up by our officials. Some of these conversations have been absolutely worth having, no question about it. But you could be forgiven for thinking the way they attack me on the issue that I'm the priest who has committed every single one of the offences. I'm the official who covered up every single crime. See, the problem with pent-up rage for all of us is it can be a bit indiscriminate when we think we've got an opportunity to let someone have it. Do you know, I think the way that people talk to clerks and people on phones now is an absolute disgrace. I think there's very little dignity. Sometimes when I'm in a shopping centre, or I'm at an airport, and you hear the way people speak to the person behind. They're doing their job and they're doing their best. Now, sometimes they've mucked it up. They didn't get it wrong, but you're going to cop it. While we can rightly be angry, we've always got to give people dignity. That's the gospel. And we can say, look, I'm very angry, and it's not your fault. So I do want to lodge my protest, and on we can go from there. Well, these people absolutely vent their spleen. I want to return to the sexual abuse crisis later, but for the moment, the best person I've ever met on a plane, I think, certainly one of the most extraordinary, was, I'll go back a step. When I got my PhD, I changed my status from father to doctor. And because the customer service director, if I was travelling in Mufti, the customer service director would come down and say, Father Leonard, welcome back to Qantas. And then all those things would start all over again. So I changed it to doctor. Well, on the next long-haul flight from Los Angeles to Sydney, the Qantas customer service manager came down to row 57 in economy class, and after welcoming me back as one of our top-tier frequent flyers, she said, if there's anything we can do for you, I would be delighted to do it. And so I said immediately, an upgrade to business class would be wonderful. She laughed and walked back to the pointy end of the plane. Her definition of anything and mine obviously were not the same thing. But on the next flight to London, down came the customer service director to greet me at row 41 on this occasion and made a request. She said, Dr. Leonard, if there's someone in first class who may need your attention. I explained that if this particular woman was having problems selecting between first release and premium movies, I was her man. But in fact, if she was sick, I wasn't the type of doctor she needed. After she walked away, the customer service director walked down the aisle. I wanted to call after her and say, however, if that woman in first class goes to God, come back because I know all the prayers of the dead off by heart. I restrained myself. But of all the conversations I've had on a plane, the most extraordinary one led to this book. I was flying on Qantas from New York City to Los Angeles before working here and then going on to Australia last year, or maybe the year before now. And as I settled into row 44, a very friendly young US citizen sat next to me and asked me what I did. I told him. He said he had been a Catholic. I noticed the past tense, but I didn't say anything. He wasn't sure about anything to do with faith and spirituality, and then I told him I was a Jesuit, which led him to tell me that he said, you know, I went to Georgetown and I've stayed in contact with one of the Jesuit priests at Georgetown, and he recently gave me a couple of books to read by a Jesuit. I forget his name, those books. And I said, do you remember the titles? He said, I do remember the titles. They're called Where the Hell is God and Why Bother Praying? I got up and looked around this plane for the candid camera. What is the likelihood of that actually happening? This is extraordinary. I think we call it providence. He wouldn't believe me that I was even Richard Leonard who wrote those books, because he said, do you know those books? I said, I know them intimately. I wrote the bloody books. And he wouldn't believe me until I produced my passport to prove I was Richard Leonard, because he said, yeah, that's the guy, you're the guy who wrote the book. So the scene was unbelievable. Thomas and I had a long and engaging conversation about the issues my two books raised for him. And though we were as discreet as we could be, I'd have to say some of our passengers must have wanted an emergency landing because of not Theology 101. We were doing Theology 404 in row 44. It was getting a very intense theological discussion. Wonderful, but intense. Tom was, without question, one of the finest young men I've had the privilege to meet. He's 30 years of age. He was a highly educated young man. He'd gone to Georgetown for undergrad. He went to Harvard as an Ivy League graduate. And he was also a serious humanitarian. He told me that on every single summer holiday from Georgetown through to the end of his graduate studies at Harvard, he'd worked in third world countries for Habitat for Humanity. And he was wrestling with issues of belief and theology, prayer and the problem of evil. And they all came out of personal experiences. Because when he saw the poor in third world countries, he just thought this is not right. And God can't preside, a loving God can't preside over a world with such inequity, with such lack of justice for all God's children. And then he said, the problem with your books, I thought this is good. He said, the problem with your books is they don't pick up the fundamental question of why we should believe. And I want to quote what he said. I just get worn down by the growing chorus of people who say religion is all nuts and you can be a good person and make a difference in the world and not believe more than that. And to say that the Catholic Church has made it very easy to walk away in recent years is an understatement. But Tom wanted more than that. He went on, I can't simply believe that my life and much more the people with whom I've seen in action with the poorest of the poor amount to nothing more than the here and now. There must be more purpose to life, or at least I hope so. And then came the clincher. He said, I love reading the Gospels and what Jesus has to say on many things. I think St. Paul and the others in the New Testament offer great lessons for life. But I guess I'm just struggling with what we're doing on earth for Christ's sake. As soon as he said for Christ's sake, of course, he immediately apologised, fearing he had offended me as a priest by cussing in front of me. Not at all. I said, everything that every baptised person does is for Christ's sake. Just because it's become a throwaway line doesn't rob it of its original power. Paul in Galatians 2, in Colossians 5, talks about everything we do for the sake of Christ. So, as soon as I got off that plane in Los Angeles, firstly, I wrote down everything he said, and secondly, I knew I had a new book. That if I was going to fundamentally say something, particularly to young adults, to their parents and grandparents, to their teachers, then I wanted to have a go. Let me give you a quick walkthrough about some of the things, because that does help us all have our further faith, hope and love. The first thing I say is that there's common ground between people who believe and people who don't. Sometimes we want to make them the enemy. Serious mistake. Most of the best atheists and agnostics I've met are really good human beings who want kindness, truthfulness, care for the earth, justice, peace and love. We're not against each other on fundamental things. How we get there and why we get there, okay, we're going to be divergent about it. And whether it has any implication for the next world, clearly we're going to depart company. But I think we should focus on what unites us more than what divides. I also think that dialogue with atheists can be actually good for us. I think we have to take them very, very seriously, because I think they do a couple of things. They give us clarity in our thinking, rational arguments for faith, the case for religious influence over public policy, we've got a right to be heard, and practicing what we preach, because the big objection often is we don't practice what we preach. As Gandhi once famously said to the British Governor-General of India, I would take the waters of baptism tomorrow if I saw Christians practicing what they believe. He's also on record as saying, by the way, that the Beatitudes is probably the finest spiritual utterance ever articulated by a human being on this earth. Gandhi, a Hindu. The freedom to believe, this is really important in your country and mine. Sometimes we might want everyone to believe, and we'd love that, the way, the truth and the life. But let's get clear. I think all people of religion need to defend people's right not to believe as well. Because once you say that everyone or anyone has not the right to not to believe, the argument can come back to us too, that we can be told we shouldn't be believing, we shouldn't have our values articulated, we shouldn't be public Christians. So if you are allowed to be public Christians, and we want to be, and we should be, then we should also have public atheists and agnostics. Do I agree with them? Absolutely not. But I defend their right not to believe. Why? Because your country and mine magnificently, profoundly, as a great gift, is a pluralistic democracy. We're not a theocracy. We're a pluralistic democracy. So I think we should defend the right of people not to believe. Now, it would be nice if our detractors also recognised one fundamental issue about Christians, and especially the Catholic Church in your country and mine. We are the biggest provider of welfare, healthcare, education and social relief, third world social relief, outside government in the world right now. Nobody does more, particularly through religious communities and through the church as a whole. Catholic relief, third world relief, education, healthcare, welfare, often with the poorest of the poor. It'd be nice if they just recognised that even though they might disagree with why we do what we do good things. We'll be back to our downside in a minute. And not all Christians are the same. I don't know if any of you have read Richard Dawkins' book, but he's a terribly smart geneticist at Oxford University. He's also I think he's a rather nasty personality. I don't find him attractive, but that said, I defend his right to write his books. But that said, I want to say this about him. He made a fundamental error in these books because we're all Christians are the same. You just talk about Christians say this and Christians believe that. Well, no, we don't. Now, we might fundamentally believe in Jesus Christ together, but we depart on something terribly important. Catholics constitute the largest group of Christians in the world. 1.4 billion Catholics in the world right now. Now, roughly, anyway. 1.4 billion. We're the largest group by a long shot. We do not take the Bible literally. We used to until 1965, Section 5 of the Constitution on Divine Revelation, on the Bible from Vatican II, where we always believed the Bible needed careful interpretation, but we did take it fairly literally. Well, we don't anymore, and we haven't since 1964. That matters because a lot of the people who attack Christianity, atheists and agnostics, always say we all take the Bible literally. Well, the largest single group actually, at least in principle, do not do so. Let me give you a story. When I go near a mall or a shopping centre and I find our evangelical brothers and sisters evangelising there, I'm actually very admiring. I know very few Catholics who would stand in a mall or outside a train station or a plane trying to give, to witness to their faith publicly. Maybe some of you would. I know very few, and I'm not sure if I could do it easily either. So I do admire them, but because I consider myself to be a Christian, I give them a bit of a berth. So I go around them. Every single time they come after me. I don't know what I must give out, something saying, I'm Jesuit. I don't know what I give out, but something happens because they come after me. Brother, excuse me, have you given your life to Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Saviour? Actually, I have. Do you speak in tongues? No, but I don't yes, but I don't find it a helpful form of communication. How do you know you've given your life to Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Saviour? I say, listen, my friend, poverty, chastity and obedience for life for Christ has to be a push in the right direction. Mind you, as soon as I say that, I always remember the time I took my first vows at our wonderful school of St Ignatius Loyola in high school in Sydney, which is a peninsula jutting into Sydney Harbour with 77 acres. The Jesuits are good at many things, and real estate is one of them. LMU is a very nice piece of real estate. So's Georgetown, so's Fordham, so's Loyola, so's the University of San Francisco. We're good on, and Loyola High School. We're pretty good on real estate. Well, I took my vows there. All those beautiful old sandstone buildings facing the water. Where my mother came down, I'd taken my vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. She came out, she looked at the Sydney CBD, the water on three sides, the wonderful old buildings, the wisteria growing up the walls. And my mother turned to me and she said, if this is poverty, I want to see chastity. She said, it's looking loose and fast to me. I said, we're very good on obedience. The other line that's often said about religious order men and diocesan priests like Monsignor and Father Greg is that it's often said that we take the vow of poverty and diocesan clergy keep the vow of poverty. Well, so that might be true too. But back to my evangelical Christians, I said, seeing you ask me these rather personal questions, can I ask you? Ask away, they say, brother, ask away. I thought, you started this, I'm going to finish it. And you didn't know you had a Jesuit priest on your hands, but here we go. I said, do you believe the Bible is literally true in every... Amen, brother, I do. Every word of it is literally true. I said, if that's the case, can you just answer me a couple more questions? Was creation created in 7 days, or are there two? There's two chapters, we have two versions. They can't both be right. The angel come to Mary or to come to Joseph? Was the Sermon on the Mount or on the plain? Are there 4 Beatitudes or are there 9? Are there 6 injunctions in the Lord's Prayer or are there 8? When did Jesus go to Jerusalem once or several times? Did the angel come to Joseph or come to Mary? When Jesus got out of the tomb, did he appear to Mary Magdalene first or to St. Peter? What were the last words of Jesus on the cross? We've got 4 Gospels, we've got 3 versions. And then when did Pentecost and Ascension happen? Did it happen on the same day as the resurrection, John's Gospel? Or did it happen 40 and 50 days later in Luke Acts? By that stage, the supervisors come over and they want to lay hands on me and pray over me because I have the spirit of confusion in me. I'm not the one confused. I respect our brothers and sisters very, very much. But when Dawkins tells us we all take the Bible literally, 1.4 billion of us do not. I do not believe the world was created 6,000 years ago in 7 days. You do not have to check your scientific brain in at the back door of the Catholic Church. Of the 19,000 Jesuits, 1,643 as of the 1st of January have a PhD in one of the scientific disciplines. We are not enemies of science, and nor should we be. The present Pope has a master's degree in chemistry. I don't think he would be against scientific revelations. So we need to be careful about this. Let's talk about science. Not all atheists are the same either, but, we'll leave that go for the moment. I want to talk about science and religion. You don't have to choose between science and religion. Science asks how we came to be here. Faith asks why we're here in the first place. And not all scientists are atheists. And in the book I go into some detail of it, proving that that's true. The presumption that you'd have to be an atheist to be a scientist is nonsense. I know some wonderful scientists, and there are scientists in this room, I know, who clearly have profound Christian faith. As Pope Benedict XVI said about evolutionary biology, there is no conflict, and I quote, there's no conflict between evolutionary biology and Catholic faith. At the moment, it is the best theory we have to explain how God brought the world to be through infinite patience over an extraordinary amount of time, and faith attends to why that came to be in the first place. Evolutionary biology attends to how we came to be here, to the technical side. Faith attends to the why, to the meaning side. I think that's pretty good. Arguments for science and belief in God, really the ones that are extraordinary, of course, are balance and detail, complexity and synchronicity. And I love this article. You might like to chase it up if you want to. Eric Metaxas, in his Science Increasingly Makes the Case for God, has a wonderful quote. The odds against the universe existing are so heart-stoppingly astronomical that the notion that it just happened, that it happened randomly, defies common sense. It'd be like tossing a coin and having it come up heads 10 quintillion times in a row. Really? So sometimes people want to say we're nuts for believing that God could be the author of creation, the first prime mover that gets the whole thing in process. Well, I'm not the only one making a leap of faith. Randomness is also a leap of faith, a leap into the belief that it just happened. It was just all lined up the way it should be. Because let's get clear, if one even small thing, but certainly major thing, was not in harmony, not in balance, not in detail, not in complexity as it is, we would not be here. So I find the argument from balance and synchronicity to be extraordinary. The other reason why I think religious faith is certainly plausible is because it's not scientific knowledge, it's religious knowledge. There are different types of knowing. Simply be told now that it's only scientific knowledge is wrong. There's obviously IQ. We talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about social intelligence, and more recently we've started to talk about spiritual intelligence, things that come as a result of spiritual experience, which can't be put in a petri dish and put under a microscope, but are real nonetheless. For instance, and they're not just about religious things, how do we know sacrificial love? How do we know forgiveness, beauty, conscience? You can't experiment on them in a laboratory. You know them because we've experienced them. Experience gives us wonderful knowledge that can be very powerful. It's not the same as scientific knowledge, I'm not pretending it is, but it's not less either, because human experience is powerful. People do lots of things. I'll give you one example. You and I all know people who on their wedding day, we thought it was a disaster that Jack married Jill. Absolute disaster. Sometimes we were right. Sometimes we were horribly wrong. I've seen those weddings. I've done those weddings where on the surface of it, how could they love each other? How is this going to work? It does. So it goes against all rationality, but actually they know enough experience of each other to know they can make it work, and it does. and this is important. If you're a happy Catholic, don't say this wasn't a practical mission. If you're a happy Catholic, could you please tell your face about it sometime soon? Catholics are some of the gloomiest lot I have ever seen in my life. Like, honestly, joy is meant to be one of the great insights of the gospel. This is not trendy or new. 1 Corinthians 4. Paul talks about the joy of the gospel. What was Pope Francis's famous encyclical to the church? The joy of the gospel. In other words, not that we walk around with a supercilious smile on our face. That's a pathology. He's talking about the joy that says, I know where I've come from, I know why I'm here, and I know where I'm going. If that doesn't put a spring in your step, I don't know what will. All I know is if I didn't encounter joyful Catholics, I wouldn't be standing here right now. Why? In my year 10 at my Catholic Irish Christian Brothers High School, in walked a group of young Catholics trying to promote a charismatic young people's retreat. And I knew them. They were in my parish. I knew their brothers and sisters. They were older than me. They were in their late teens and early 20s, and I was 15 going on 16. But I'll never forget to this day that all 5 of them were passionate about their faith and joyful. I'd never heard a Catholic, certainly not a young Catholic, talk like this. I'd seen earnest Catholics, I'd seen devout Catholics, I'd seen very serious Catholics, but I don't think I'd seen too many happy ones. Now, sometimes parents and grandparents scream and yell at their kids because they're not going to Mass anymore. And you're going to go to hell for eternity if you don't go to Mass. I don't know if you've noticed, that hasn't been working lately. So why don't we do a bit of evidence-based testing and say, let's stop doing things that aren't working. We can threaten hell and damnation till the cows come home. They're not listening. They don't care. So let's try another strategy. If your kids aren't going to Mass, if your grandkids don't go to Mass, I want you to do something for me. Throw that strategy out. It hasn't been working. You've been trying it for 20 years. Try a new one. Be the most transparently joyful Catholic you know. Wonderfully filled with faith, hope, love and joy. Because all I know is at your funeral, which I will do, up will come that young person, your grandchild, and would say, I don't know what Nana and Pop had, but I'm telling you, Father, their faith gave them really something very important. Bingo. That's the moment, because it's your witness of your life. Not screaming and yelling and stomping your foot and talking about the damnation of hell. It isn't working. So let's try a new strategy, and it comes down to our religious experience. Believers are not all alone. So, in fact, it's only 5.4% of the entire world's population are atheist and non-religious. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have rights to it. I've passionately said we should be defending them. But we've got 31% of the world are Christian, 23 are Muslim, 15 are Hindu, 17 are Buddhist, and 18% all other religions, including our Jewish friends. One of the most important things is our image of God. Who are we promoting and what are we saying about God? And I write about this extensively, both in Where the Hell is God and Why Bother Praying. This book had a big impact. This is a US theologian called Martin Borg. And he said in The God We Never Knew, he says, tell me your image of God and I will tell you your theology. Let me give you a story about where we've shifted. When my Aunt Margaret in 1953 was a very, very successful and very accomplished nurse, and she tells the story of 1953. She was in charge of at night time of St Vincent's Catholic Hospital in Sydney, a big Sisters of Charity Catholic hospital, still functioning, wonderful place. And it's for the poor. It's a big public hospital. She was in charge of the theatres at night. The nuns worked 7 to 7. She worked 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. She tells a story that one Tuesday night, she went from case to case to case to case to case to case. They would just absolutely run off their feet. So much so, at 7 o'clock, when she handed over to the sister who ran the theatres during the day, she went home starving, hadn't eaten for 12 hours, had cooked herself up a big plate of bacon and eggs and sat down and ate it. She shared her apartment with another registered nurse. And so she thought she was still asleep. At 7:30, she heard the door open and in walked her flatmate, sporting a big black ash on her forehead. Oh my God, it's Ash Wednesday. And I've just eaten the bacon and eggs. Now, even in 1953, she was not in a state of serious mortal sin. You had to have full knowledge. She wasn't, but she thought she was. She thought she was going to go to hell for eternity. So, what did she do? Well, firstly, she raced off to the toilet to try and make herself throw up. She wasn't mad, nutty or crazy. She was a very normal Catholic for 1953. And then secondly, when that didn't work, she got on the bus and got to the first place in Sydney, St Patrick's Church, Church Hill, was then and is now the first place you can go to confession in Sydney. And now imagine rather than get on the bus, she got run over by the bus. Here's how we think the conversation would have gone. God would have said to Margaret, Margaret, you've been a wonderful person. You've gone to Mass every Sunday, sometimes during the week. You say your rosary. You've got great devotion to Mary, the Mother of God and the saints. And you've been looking after the poor through your nursing skill. But what are we going to do about the bacon, honey? I'm sorry, Margaret. Hell for eternity. Next case. Like, we can laugh at this now, but we know people for whom this was no laughing matter. I see people on their deathbed who are still unbelievably frightened to meet God. Oh, it breaks my heart. These are the most devout, most beautifully living Catholic and Christian people I know. And they're petrified. Tell me your image of God, and I'll tell you your theology. Some of our people, our friends, our family, reject an image of God which is worth rejecting. I reject it too. And I went to great pains to do it in Where the Hell is God and Why Bother Praying, and again in this book, because I think it's really important. The God we proclaim and live must be a God that people can love and believe in. Otherwise, we're believing in a tyrant. A couple of issues I raised, which young people bring up all the time, is religion the cause of most wars? Well, no, it's not. And I go into detail about this, but this is good to have it at your fingertips because it's said all the time. There are these wonderful two books that came out in the last couple of years. The God of Wars by Miak Pierce. This is a serious book. Get it if you want to, but it's heavy going. Is Religion the Primary Cause of Violent Conflict? And the Encyclopedia of Wars. They can prove that of the 1,763 official wars in history, 68 were clearly religious. Now, we're not running away from the fact that religion's in the mix, but actually it can be more shown that it's about land, political power, resources, conflict over culture, tribe, national and social issues. Now, religion's in there, not running away. But people want to say that if we had no religion in the world right now, we wouldn't have wars. Rubbish. It stands up to no serious analysis. Yet it's said and unchallenged as though it's correct. The second thing I want to talk about is the sexual abuse crisis. Nothing has undermined our confidence, personally, mine as well. There's been no other issue on which I've thought about leaving the Catholic priesthood in the last 23 years than this, because I thought the institution itself could be rotten to the core. Now, I don't believe that because I believe in you. That's why I'm here. I don't stay because of a pope or a cardinal or a bishop or a pedophile. I stay because the people of God that I'm privileged to serve every single day are wonderful people who are trying to be faithful, hopeful and loving, and I'm trying that myself. But Pope Francis is cleaning us up. He said to the Cardinal O'Malley's commission for the whole church on sexual abuse recently, there is no place in the church's ministry for those who commit these abuses. We need to do everything in our power to ensure that these sins have no place in the church. May God give us the grace to be ashamed. Isn't that a confronting thing to say? The whole idea of being a triumphalist church, Francis is saying those days are finished. We have been brought to our knees, and humility is the way to go. Why has Francis had such an impact on the world? One of the things, he's so humble. The guy is actually a humble guy. And do you know, just to give you a stat, I work in communications. I go to the Pontifical Council for Social Communications meetings and in the Vatican. Do you know we can now prove the Catholic News Service in Washington, D.C., look at 20 of the major English language newspapers in the world every single day to look at the reporting. They analyse the reporting, not just in the United States, England, New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, English speaking. We can prove from their analysis that in the previous 10 years to Pope Francis, the reporting of the church was 70% negative, 30% positive. Almost all that 70 was sexual abuse. 30%, thank God for it. We can now show, and of course, in 2 days' time, we will celebrate the second anniversary of Pope Francis's election, the 13th of March. I was in the square that night, teaching at the Vatican. I was so privileged to be there. But when he came out on that balcony, we can now prove that within a year, he'd turned that around to 70% positive reporting, 30% negative reporting. If you had a CEO who did that for your company, you would triple, if not quadruple, his payout at the end of that year. Now, he's getting a bonus because he's going straight to heaven. So that's okay. We're all going to get our reward in heaven. Oh my God, I hope heaven is there. I'm not doing this for nothing, you know. And I want to see you there too. But let's get clear. We've got to confront this. So Francis is helping us be more humble, be more listening, and confronting our sinfulness head on. Thank God for that. We really need it. And sometimes people say, well, we should be very forgiving, even of priests and religious who have done these terrible crimes. Yes, we should be forgiving, but they shouldn't be in leadership. It's to get things horribly confused to say that a religious should stay a religious or a priest stay a priest, even after they have abused a child. No. We can work to forgive them, as Christians must, as tough as that is with this crime. He says, and he's right, they have no place in the ordained ministry or the professed leadership of the church. There's the line in the sand. St. Augustine said in the 5th century, forgiveness is like a mother who has two lovely daughters called justice and compassion. Oh, I love that quote. Forgiveness is like a mother who has two lovely daughters called justice and compassion. For the sake of victims, we have to hold people to justice. There has to be consequences for criminal and evil behaviour. That doesn't mean we don't do it compassionately, but it's not a false compassion. Though we don't have the morality as market-cornered, we need to be careful and true that we do have wonderful things to say to our world as a result of reflecting on 2,000 years of human experience. Aquinas on the cardinal virtues and the Christian values and even the 7 deadly sins. Remember that those cardinal virtues are justice, fidelity, self-care, prudence, and then the Christian values are mercy and hospitality. Wonderful. They're wonderful ways to live, to be just, faithful, self-caring, prudent, merciful and hospitable. And at the same time, we don't need to throw out the 7 deadly sins. Here's an old-fashioned line for a mission. The 7 deadly sins, do you remember them? Pride, greed, envy, anger, lust, gluttony and sloth. Or sloth, both pronunciations in English are acceptable. I want to bring back the word sloth. Isn't it a wonderful word? It's onomatopoeic. It's exactly the way you would expect it to sound. My grade 2 teacher was a wonderful Irish Sister of Mercy called Sister Mary St. Benedict. She was 6'1" tall, I now know, and in all the regalia she looked even bigger. Behind her back we called her Gigantor. And she loved the word sloth, and she used to say, we were 8 years of age, she would say, you lot are the most slothful bunch I've ever had the misfortune to teach. I've never known sloth like I know it in this classroom right now. And if you don't stop the sloth, you'll be going to hell for eternity. Johnny Davis was my best friend in grade 2. He turned to me one day and he said, what's sloth? And I said, I don't know, but we've got to stop doing it or we're going to go to hell. We didn't even know what we were supposed to stop doing. And of course, the word is apathy, really. That's the better word now. It's not laziness, it's apathy. And Edmund Burke, the 1770 political philosopher, said it better than anyone. Evil reigns when good people, you and me, do nothing. That's why it's brilliant that we have always had the sin of commission and the sin of omission. We are absolutely responsible for what we used to say, I think it was put better in the old film of the Creed, what we have done and what we have failed to do. So there we go. Pride, greed, envy, anger, lust, gluttony, and sloth. And as a result, we try to live this as best as we can. But trying to live those as best we can, I think, is also about trying to communicate the richness of our faith to an unbelieving world. And sometimes the language gets in the road. It's all about reading the signs. This Brian Appleyard has a wonderful version. He's a Jew who went back and wanted to work out whether the 10 Commandments still has something to say to a contemporary world. So the problem is not the 10 Commandments, but how we say them. And I think he did a brilliant job. He says, love the Lord your God is basically be serious. Have no other gods before him. Get real, you can't serve several gods. Don't take the Lord God's name in vain. Be humble. The creature is not the creator. Keep holy the Sabbath day. Be quiet. Honour your father and mother. Respect age. Thou shalt not kill. Don't kill or we'll end up committing race suicide. Don't commit adultery. Mean what you say. Thou shalt not steal. Don't steal or there'll be nothing left for anyone. Don't bear false witness. Honour others, their frailties are usually your own. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife, servant or ox. Be kind, be generous and don't sleep around. See, if you said that to a young 25-year-old, in his version, they think they're all fantastic. So I want to come back to the virtue of prudence. It's an old-fashioned word, but it's a wonderful idea. St. Thomas Aquinas says that prudence is one of the great virtues of the Christian life. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. And saying the same old thing in the same old way, sometimes to the same old people, isn't working. One of the great gifts of the Spirit is to be able to speak in a way that people will hear and speak in an accessible language. That's why, again, I think Pope Francis is working now, because his language is so accessible. And he makes mistakes and he says some silly things and he goes off script every so often. I'd much prefer that than straight-jacketed stuff, where in fact the language is so complex I haven't got a clue what he's talking about. Because the Lord spoke accessibly, directly, and with authority. It's all about reading the signs of the times, which the sainted John the 23rd said was the great task of us in the modern world. That's why he called the council. Let me tell you a story about reading the signs. Many centuries ago, in a very, very different world to our own, the Pope decided that all the Jews of Rome had to be sent into exile from Rome. And naturally, rightly, there was an uproar from the Jewish community. So the Pope made a deal. He'd have a religious debate with a member of the Jewish community. If the Jews won the debate, they could stay. If he won the debate, they'd have to leave. The Jews realised they had no choice. Problem was that nobody wanted to debate the Holy Father. The only volunteer they could find was a simple, poor old man named Moshe, who opened the door to the synagogue and was the janitor at the synagogue every weekend. Not being used to using words very much, Moshe asked for one addition to the debate rules. Neither side would be allowed to speak. The Pope thought this was very odd, but agreed nonetheless. The day of the great debate arrived at the Vatican. The Moshe and the Pope sat opposite each other. The Pope raised his hands and showed 3 fingers. Moshe looked straight back at him and raised 1 finger. The Pope put his hand around his head and Moshe pointed right to where they sat. They sat in silence then for a very long time until the Pope went under the table and put on the table the chalice of wine and the wafer for the Eucharist and looked back very satisfied. And Moshe looked at him for a while and then went into his pocket and pulled out an apple and put it on the table. With that, the Pope stood up and said, "The man's too good. He's a brilliant theologian. The Jews have to stay." Soon, the cardinals were around the Pope explaining to him how he lost the unlosable debate. Well, he said, "I held up 3 fingers to represent the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit." And he came back rightly to say, "But there is one God in which we believe." I then said that God was everywhere, and he rightly reminded me, "Yes, that's true, but he's also here and now." And they said, "What was the clincher? How did he win it?" He said, "I put out the wine and the wafer to remind him of the gift of Jesus Christ in and through the Eucharist to the Christian church." And he came back with the apple to remind me of original sin. The man had an answer for absolutely everything. Meanwhile, on the other side of town at the synagogue, the rabbis and scholars were around Moshe, the janitor, wondering how he won the unwinnable debate. "Well," said Moshe, "very strange man, that Pope. Firstly, he said, 'You Jews have 3 days to get out of Rome.' And I said to him, 'Not one of us is going.' Then he said, 'I will clear Rome of all the Jews.' And I said, 'We're staying right put.' And they said, 'What was the clincher? How did you win the unwinnable debate?' He said, 'This was very odd. That old man, he took out his lunch, so I took out mine.'" We have to get good. We have to get good at reading the signs and then adapting our language. Adapting our language. And it's not being trendy or throwing out the teaching of the church. It's the virtue of prudence. Wanting to say the right thing at the right time to the right person. Wanting that gift. I think we need to pray for that gift. And then finally, what I do in this book is it's not what we say that people will listen to, it's what we do. So I go through a series of people in the book who have inspired me. And there's some of the ones that are there. Thomas More, Ignatius Loyola, the Venerable Catherine Macaulay, Mary MacKillop, Dorothy Day, Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, Oscar Romero, Pope Francis, my own family, survivors of sexual abuse and physical abuse by church personnel, and the Trappist monks of Algeria. I just want to mention a couple in finishing then. The first is Mary MacKillop. She's the first, and at this stage, the only canonised saint of Australia. Now, I love Mary MacKillop because unlike the United States, where you were founded by the pilgrims here for religious freedom, do you know why white people came to Australia? The biggest prison farm in the world. We're convicts. Nobody in the 1,206 people who came into Sydney Cove on the 26th of January 1788, nobody wanted to be there. So you have a wonderful beginning story. We're a shocking one. And as a result, we're slightly rebellious and always a bit anti-authority because that's the roots of our country. We're very suspicious of authority. So we don't have hand on our heart for the flag. We don't think that our Prime Minister, well, he's just another person to take down a notch or two. And we don't have the same sense. I admire the United States with your great sense of civic pride in your offices and in the person of the President, whether Republican or Democrat. I think that's absolutely admirable. My country doesn't have it because we've got a very complex beginning to the entire country. That said, Mary MacKillop is perfect. She was a religious woman. She founded a religious order called the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And there are only two people in the entire Catholic Church who have gone from being excommunicated to being canonised, Joan of Arc and Mary MacKillop. Mary MacKillop was excommunicated in 1871. She had to get to Rome to get her order under the pontifical right that the local bishops wouldn't be nasty to her. One of them excommunicated her, and it was all about power and authority. And do you know how she got to Rome? Well, the Catholic community were desperately poor. The Jesuits, her spiritual directors, had no money either. Two people came to the rescue for Mary MacKillop who admired her enormously. Emmanuel Solomon and Joanna Barr-Smith. A Jew and a Presbyterian in 1871 paid for a first-class ticket from Adelaide in South Australia to Rome so she could meet Pius IX and her order could be protected and she could then go about her work. 101 years after she died, she went 132 years after she was excommunicated, she was declared a saint of the entire Universal Church. I love that. We can't remember any of the men who oppressed her. We remember Mary MacKillop. Men note well. Women often have the last say. Why? It took Joan of Arc 489 years from being burnt as a heretic and excommunicated to being declared the patron saint of France. The other person I want to talk about is my family. Thank you to many of you who have asked about my mother and my sister. And in this I just write up, they continue to inspire me every single day. My mother is 82 years of age this August. Last night at our family home, she got up at midnight, 3 o'clock and 6 a.m. and turned her 54-year-old quadriplegic daughter. My mother has been doing that every single night for 25 years. Mum has nursed Tracy at home for 25 of the 26 years she's been a quadriplegic. And people wonder why. It's a bit indulgent to write up about my family. Don't know about you. No greater love have we than to lay down our lives for each other. My mother hasn't been on an international holiday, barely an interstate holiday. My mother hasn't done a single thing for herself, I think pretty well, in 25 years. She goes to Mass every single day. I don't need to go past my own family to know why I believe in Jesus Christ and why it can sustain us even through our own personal Calvaries. My own family. And then finally, I write up a wonderful story in this book that's not up there, but about Gloria. And I want to finish by telling you the story of Gloria. Because my first degree is in music, when I was appointed as a deacon and as a priest to the parish of St Canice's in King's Cross, the red light district of Sydney, then I announced that I'd be refounding the Catholic Church's choir. Anybody who'd like to come and join the choir, come and see me after Mass. And after Mass, after the 10:30 Mass on the pavement, up walked a beautifully dressed woman in a midnight blue outfit with a big floral hat. She came up and said, "Excuse me, Father, my name's Gloria, and I'd like to join the choir. I sing bass. I said, well, it's very hard to find basses, Gloria. You'd be very welcome. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7:30 in the choir loft for our first rehearsal. Good on you, Father. We'll see you then. She walked off, stopped, turned on her stiletto and said, you realise I'm a tranny, don't you, Father? I said, Gloria, I might have grown up in a small country town in Queensland, Australia, but even I worked out that you were a transvestite. I said, it's very hard to find a woman who can actually sing bass. Gloria was, without question, the worst bass I have ever heard in my entire life. The only note that she had was that deep sonorous note that some basses can get at the end of a hymn or a motet. Amen. And it can rip through a church or a hall. Well, word spread like wildfire that you've got to come and hear the transvestites singing in the Catholic Church's choir. And our congregation was more colourful than it was even normally. And one Sunday we had one of those motets that finished with an amen. And with that, she had a number of her friends there. 2 pews of transvestites and transsexuals got up in the middle of Mass and yelled out, you show 'em, girl. Now, I know this will come as an incredible shock to you, but not every Catholic in the parish was coping. Isn't that a surprise? And they were long and loud in their criticism. And it eventually got through to the parish council. They took up a petition that said Gloria was to leave the Catholic Church's choir because she was making a mockery of a Mass and she was a distraction to our prayer. It got to the parish council. I had a 71-year-old Irishman called Donald Taylor, wonderful man, and he never spoke at parish council meetings except to say the opening and closing prayer. And I used to challenge him about this, and he used to say to me, oh, look, I let the laity have their head at the parish council meeting to discuss all the little issues they want to talk about, but I don't intervene because the bottom line is this: if they decide to do something that I don't want to do, I won't be doing it anyway. That's not the best model of governance I've ever heard in my entire life. But on this occasion, the chairwoman of the parish council said, Father, before we put this to the vote about keeping Gloria in the choir or not, would you like to say something? And I've never forgotten what that man said. He said, on this occasion, I have something to say, all right. Our blessed Lord in the 14th chapter of Luke's Gospel says that when you give a banquet, don't invite your rich friends because you're only inviting them so they might invite you back. When you give a banquet, go out into the highways and the byways and pull in the poor, the crippled, the lame and the blind. Now, last I checked, Catholic theology says that Christ invites whomever Christ wants to the Holy Mass. Christ hosts us all at the Mass. And the likes of you sitting around telling the Lord whom he will and will not be able to have at his Eucharist. Well, if this is what you think, then you vote that fella out tonight, confused, as he obviously is. Then tomorrow, every Jesuit in your precious parish will be packing up and moving out as well. Because we're broken too, not just as publicly as that fella shows. So note well, one vote will see 5 people go. Now go ahead and have your little vote. We won the vote. Stay with me, it gets gender confused. Gloria came to see me to say that wife was dying of cancer in another city and she needed to get some help to sort out her issues. And I got her in to see a psychiatrist who works with gender confusion issues, and she vanished from the parish for months. Then one day a man turned up at the doorstep. I didn't even know who it was until he spoke. G'day, Father. Gordon, just come to say goodbye and thank you for everything. And a good while later, a letter arrived from Gordon, which he asked to be read out at the Sunday Masses if we chose to. Boy, did we choose to. This is what it said. Several months ago, as you all know, I arrived home again and connected with my wife and sons. Last night at home with the 3 of us holding her, she died peacefully of the breast cancer she's had for the last 18 months. After the undertakers took her away and I put our 2 boys back to bed, I couldn't sleep, so I started to write this letter to simply say that I know I wouldn't even have been here tonight if it wasn't for the goodness of the Catholic community and parish at King's Cross. I know it wasn't easy for some of you having a drag queen in your choir, but you believed in me even when I didn't know who I was, what I wanted or where I needed to go. Because you hung in there with me, I was able to find out what mattered, get some help, come home, nurse my wife to her death this night, and now be a father to my boys in the way they deserve, because they've done nothing in this world to deserve to be orphans. Who could have thought that approaching Father Richard all those many months ago now on the footpath outside your church was actually going to reconcile a husband to a wife who was so magnificent in forgiveness and to giving back to two boys their dad. You've inspired me to have faith. Faith I didn't have before I sang in your choir, but faith I've got now because I've seen how practical, real, loving and engaging it can be. Father Richard, I don't know if you remember the first song you taught me in your parish choir that we sang about 3 weeks later, but I'll never forget it. He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got the whole world 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 in his hands. Why do we hold to a gospel of joy? Why are we unashamed of our experience of Father, Son and Holy Spirit? And why do we publicly live it and proclaim it as strongly as we can? Because he's got the whole world in his hands. And if we're privileged to know it, we just have to share it. Thanks very much.